Do you have a dream that is a small seed of an idea and it's ready to sprout?
Or are you in the workplace weeds and you need to bloom in a new creative way?
Perhaps you're ready to embrace and grow a more vibrant, joyful, and authentic life. If you answered yes to any of these, you are ready to rebloom. Welcome to the podcast where we have enlightening chats with nature lovers, makers, and artisans as they share inspiring stories about pivoting to a heart-centered passion.
Hello, I'm Lori Siebert, and I am very curious to hear from friends and artisans about the creativity that blooms when you follow your heart.
And I'm Jamie Jameson, and I want to dig deep into the why behind each courageous leap of faith and walk through new heart-centered gardens.
Each episode of Rebloom will be an in-depth conversation with guests who, through self-discovery, shifted to share their passions with the world.
Get ready to find your creative joy as we plant the seeds for you to rebloom. Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Rebloom. What a treat we have for you today. Hi, Lori.
I'm so excited about talking to Courtney because she's adorable.
Well, Courtney is your friend who you met where, Lori?
At a beautiful residency in France called at Chateau Orcaville. I was lucky enough to go there this year and met 26, well, there were 26 total of us, and Courtney was one of my favorites. She's amazing, and we had some fun conversations, and I cold plunged with her for the very first time.
Okay, this is a G-rated show. We'll keep it going.
I was clothed.
Well, anywho, we're here to talk about reblooming. We should introduce Courtney. Go ahead.
I want to introduce Courtney Minor, and I can't wait to hear more about your story. I learned a little bit about you when we were in France, and then I dug a little deeper before this podcast, but I want to hear it right from you. I know you traveled a lot as a kid, and just tell us a little bit about Courtney as a little girl.
And welcome, Courtney. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. And yes,
hi.
Let's see, me as a little girl, I'm just a miniature version of myself. Truly, I was very inquisitive. I was very curious, very imaginative. Similar to how I am now, I was kind of split between being very creative and then being somewhat numbers driven. And I just kind of floated all over the place. I had imaginary horses. I had plays I wrote. I created dream worlds in my closet, and I told my family they couldn't enter unless they turned into like clouds and butterflies. And I loved Falcor, and
I love it.
I love The Outsiders and Lisa Frank. Yeah, I was always in my own little world.
Oh my gosh, that's what my family always said about me.
Yeah.
I was like, Lori's in her own little world.
Yeah.
It's a happy place in our worlds, right?
It is. I mean, I think most artists or creative spirits in general, we're often in our heads.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember, like, I would look up at the clouds and, of course, see shapes and figures. And then I would turn that into a story. And then I remember one of the things I love to do, my parents bought this home in what they call a master planned community in Houston. And I was in Missouri City. That's where I grew up, in Missouri City, Texas. And I bought this binder at Office Depot. Well, I should say my parents bought it because I was young. And I got all my dad's computer paper and I drew every single house in the neighborhood.
Wow.
And I say like the fence, the cars, the driveway, even little concrete curves that hold in the grass because everything was manicured and just so. And
yeah. Do you still have those drawings?
I don't know where those drawings are, but I did probably at least 100, 200.
I
drew every house in the neighborhood. Like, so what I did is I would walk around my little area and I would get my brother. I'm like, Franco, that's my brother's name, Franco. I said, Franco, can you like just drive me over here because where we lived right across from a lake, all these man-made lakes. And it was Lake, that's my neighborhood was called Lake Olympia. So it was right across Lake Olympia. There was a couple other Finger Lakes. So we would drive through and I would just start sketching. And then I have a pretty good memory. So I would just come back and I would literally draw every tree, every shrubbery, every begonia, lily, window shutter. Like that was little Courtney. I had a whole binder of drawings. And that made me want to become an architect when I was older. That didn't happen.
Wow.
But that's what I thought.
So
Wow.
art and architecture, but then where did it lead you?
Completely opposite.
How? What happened? You pivoted. What happened?
So life got in the way.
Yeah.
My issue was that it was an insecurity. That's what really started it. So one of my close friends, her name was Anya, and she still is a phenomenal painter, like wonderful painter. And she could do photorealistic, or at least close to it. And like her muses were Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera. And I was like, I can't do photorealistic. So in my little Courtney brain in middle school and high school, I was like, well, if I can't do photorealistic, I can't be an artist.
You know, that is a common theme that I've heard a lot of artists say.
Mm-hmm.
I can't draw like a flower that looks just like the flower, then I'm not an artist.
Yep. And that derailed me. So I remember when I came to the conclusion, I was like looking at my friend and looking at my other friends. I'm like, I can't illustrate like them. So I was like, well, I need to figure out something else to do in my life. And because I was always that way, I was a planner. I was probably like 11 or 12. And so then I went to my mom and I was like, well, Mom, I always wanted, and I told her I wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to be an artist or architect, but I don't think I'm good enough, so I need to figure something else out.
Oh,
this 12-year-old me.
You're 12. I know.
Yeah. And so then I started looking at books. I got obsessed with Rice University. And then I figured out, well, I'm creative, but maybe I'm better at inventing things or building things than I am at drawing things. So that's when I was like, well, maybe I should be an engineer. I've always been good with numbers. Let me try it.
Yeah.
And so then I literally changed my path in like leaving middle school, going to high school. I purposely chose a high school that was like an engineering specialty high school.
My gosh, you were a planner.
Yeah, like when I get focused, I get really focused. And in my head, I was like, well, I'm not good enough to be an artist, so I'm not going to keep trying. I'm just going to go do something else. Like for me, I'm very much, I'll just figure it out. And when I make up my mind to do something, I'm pretty much like a freight train. I don't stop.
Yeah.
And my life took a completely different direction. I went to engineering high school. I graduated with a degree in industrial engineering.
Wow.
Wow. And I didn't go on to build things, but I went on to design systems. But there was always just this feeling like I was not doing something I was meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I remember getting my first job out of college. I was in a factory helping create laundry detergent and working through that stuff. And I kept looking at the bottles of laundry detergent, saying, oh, who picked the flowers? Why did they pick this color cap? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? And my boss was like, you seem like you're a little bit more creative. I said, yeah, I kind of want to lean more creative. So I spent most of my adult life in my day job trying to get closer and closer to creative. So I left engineering. I went to market research. I'm in market research now. I'm like, oh, I think I want to be more creative. I want to go to marketing. When in actuality, I probably should just say being an artist or architect. But hindsight's 2020.
You just But maybe you picked up a lot of skills in those other areas that now come together with where you are now. Which, Jamie.
Yeah, do you remember we had a guest, Mary Jo Hoffman, who was an aerospace engineer, and she now is doing nature photography. And that engineering background, that mechanical, the way she looks at things is prevalent in all of her beautiful artwork now. So I bet even though you headed down that path, that engineering path, there's still a lot of the basics of that, I think, or in your, would you say, or Absolutely. In your artwork.
I would say both my engineering background as well as what I've been doing now for the last 15 years is market research, and it's ethnography. It's human interaction and human insights, and strongly influenced my work. I think that's why when I first started doing my artwork, I focused in on people. I'm now pulling away from people.
Oh, you are.
I'm starting to now.
Oh.
I'm doing a little bit more, even more abstract with not necessarily having all figures, but I focused in on microtics and human emotions because that's what I was trained to do in market research. That's what I was also trained to do in engineering and industrial engineering, was understand human psychology and behavior. And I think that's why I was always drawn to making sure I had works that focused on people showing their real emotions versus what they tried to hide. Comes in through every single piece of work I do. Like, I'm very emotional, but like that's why I focus in on the eyes, because I was trained to read microtics in people's facial expressions and body to do market research. That's what my job was. And it comes through in my art. Like, why I have tears of gold, tears of joy, tears of sadness, tears of pain, is because I was trained to be able to read the visible expressions of emotion, so that in my day job, it was used so we could figure out if people need to buy more clothes. In my art, is to figure out how do people want to deal with what they're feeling, and how do I want to deal with what I'm feeling when I'm painting. So yeah, it definitely comes through.
So I know somewhere along the way you came across the idea of collage as a medium for an artist. So you didn't feel like you could draw a photo realistically, which who cares? Yeah. And you found collage, which is what you embrace today. Like, how did that whole thing come about?
Ooh, it is one of those things. Sometimes I don't realize I'm having patterns and doing things until much later. So I'm also an art collector, and almost every artist I collected was a collage artist. I liked the idea of assembling, and I think that goes back to my engineering background, putting things together that shouldn't be together and making it into a new whole. And in my mind, I was like, well, I didn't feel like I was capable of showing the nuances of a microtype or emotion by drawing it. But I said, but I know I can photograph it. I know I can recreate it from found pieces. So then that's when I started photographing myself. I started photographing the people, because I was in Vietnam when I decided to really make collages. And I started photographing everyone that would let me when I was walking around Ho Chi Minh City. And I would take pieces of all their faces and make new faces. Sometimes I would use my own, sometimes I would make a whole new one. And it was rooted in that insecurity that I couldn't show that microtic or emotion by pencil or charcoal or brush. I was like, well, then let me piece things together to make it.
And you took that Vietnam trip as a much needed break from stress, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, my day job. I'm still working at the same company, but it was a different guard. I had a different leadership team. My boss and my boss's boss at the time, they didn't really care for me that much. And I have to admit, in the corporate world, I'm quite eccentric. Like, I'm not a full-blown type A consulting firm, went and got my MBA person. I'm just not that person. But I am very good at what I do. I just don't fit. I'm not very corporate. And this guard wanted me to be more corporate. And so they were working on kind of pushing me out. And so I had this epiphany. I was like, I think they're going to fire me.
Oh boy.
So I might as well just go on vacation. And so I remember telling my boss's boss at that time, in this building, 2 floors down, we were standing in the hallway, and I was like, you know what? I know you don't care for me that much, so let's just call it what it is. Like, you don't like me, I don't like you. So I'm just letting you know right now, I'm going away for like 4 or 5 weeks. And I hope I have a job when I return, but if I don't, I already know where I stand with you. I won't mention his name. He's since left the company, but I think he was shocked that I said it, because again, I'm not very corporate. I'm not PC. I'm very straight up. I'm very blunt. I'm not mean, but I'm straight up. And so I remember I left the building that day, and I was like, well, let me go to Ho Chi Minh. I always wanted to go to Vietnam, so I'm going to go. And so I booked my flight like 2 days later. And then I went away for like 4 or 5 weeks. And it was during the Christmas time frame, because in my family, they don't really do holidays that much. We don't celebrate or do anything. So most of the time we're gone. So it wasn't weird for me just to pick up and leave during the holidays at all. And I got an apartment.
Was this, Courtney, was this pre-COVID or post-COVID?
This was pre-COVID, because I decided to become an artist that month when I went to Ho Chi Minh. So that was probably December 2018.
Okay.
But I wasn't calling myself an artist yet, because I didn't believe I was an artist. I just knew I was going to probably get fired from my day job, and I needed to figure out my life. So I went to Vietnam to decompress. And my first goal was, okay, I need to find a way to take care of myself if I can't continue to work in a corporate setting, because I clearly just don't, right? So then I got on this idea, well, what if I just monetize what I did in my day job, which is do market research freelance and then do consulting firm. So I was sketching that out. I'm sitting in my little bunk bed in Vietnam, eating all the different noodles and street food. I love street food. And I got really overwhelmed and stressed out planning my freelance gig. And I got so overwhelmed that I started fiddling with my phone and taking selfies of myself. And I kept looking at them and I kept altering them. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to procrastinate, I might as well fully procrastinate. So I convinced this guy, because they don't really have Uber there. So I convinced this guy to drive me to what their version of Kiko's. Of course, that was an uphill battle, because I don't speak Vietnamese and they don't speak English. And I was like, I need to go print this out. How do I say this? But I found a couple of expats that they could hear me just kind of like, help.
Yeah.
And so it took about 3 hours of lost in translation, but I finally got someone to understand that I needed to put the photos from my phone into a computer to print it on paper, and that I needed to do it lots of different sizes, because they would print and say, you done. And I'm like, no, I'm not done. Because I in my head, I was envisioning, exploding my face out and taking the eye and piece of the nose. And I had this one, and I was sitting there drawing with crayons. Because again, I was stressed out, procrastinating, not planning my real job. And then I put together what would be my very first modern day collage.
Oh
and it was me, all different scales. And I got it made, and I brought it home, and then I sewed into it. I took an embroidery class when I got back to New York, because I was like, I want to sew into this thing. So I sewed into it, and then I made like maybe 10 or 20 others. Because again, I was really stressed out, because again, I came back thinking I wasn't going to have a job.
Yeah, you were going to be fired.
I was going to be fired. I came back like, okay, well, I'm trying to start this consulting thing, but they don't know me. I need to do pro bono work to get credibility. Then it dawned on me. I was like, wow, I don't have enough savings. What the hell was I thinking? So because I was so stressed, I kept making more collages. And then fast forward, the situation with my job, that 2-up boss ended up getting fired, and my 1-up boss ended up resigning, but she got basically let go. And I was thrilled, because I kept my job, and I actually got a new boss who loved me, and they're like, no, we don't want you to go anywhere. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, oh my God, I probably shouldn't have maybe just walked out the building like that day. Well, all right.
Or maybe you should have.
Or maybe I should.
Maybe you should have.
Maybe I should have.
But it's also, I think what we find too, and what I know in various points in my life, we have these high stress moments, and they can be family, they can be work, they can be any number of things. And you're just really outlining for every one of our listeners, which is so important. We've got to have creativity in your life, but you've got to have that balance. And sometimes people like to exercise, some they take walks, they get into nature. I get all of that. That's important too. I don't know. I hit points in my life, Courtney, where I was just different. Not that I was going to get fired, but I had very stressful teenagers, and I pulled in creativity. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm just like, okay, I just need to do something. And it just made it gave me a balance for the other stuff. And I didn't realize that I needed that inward balance, and that was missing from my life. And yeah.
Your story kind of made me think of, we interviewed an artist named Kathy Nichols, and she was sitting on her couch procrastinating on filling out applications to law school
Yeah.
and started staring at a big white wall and decided to paint a mural on her wall instead of filling out the paperwork. So I don't know, maybe procrastination and doing those things that you really are called to do, maybe that's a good thing, because it's kind of led you to something that's more authentic and meaningful and circles back to things that you loved as a little girl, but something derailed you, which is very sad. I hate hearing that, and it's not uncommon. It just takes that one little thought, like, you might be in choir and the teacher tells you to lip sync because you can't sing, and then you might not sing again.
Were you in my choir? Were you in my choir? Did you hear that? And my art class. But and you're right. I mean, sometimes we have that voice, that outward voice, someone else that tells us. But I think it's the important thing that we need to do is listen to that inner voice. And your inner voice was a creative voice from the very beginning. But you also had a practical voice. I mean, yes, you're not corporate, but you're also practical. We do need to pay the bills, and you have a great career. But you reach those points where you're like, wait a minute, yes, I can do this, but I still need the creativity. So we're at about 2018. You're all of a sudden 2019, I'm guessing, and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to start doing more collage and incorporating that into your life.
That wasn't how it went down. So 2019 hit, and like I said, I had made 20 some odd works. They were just had them hanging up in my apartment in Harlem, and a couple of my friends happened to just stop by my apartment. And because, again, I'm an art collector. They're like, oh, wow, you must have found a new artist you really love. Like, wow, the work was really good. And then I was like, oh, no, I made those. And then one of them was like, stop lying. And I'm like, no, I made those. I made every single one of these. Like, all of them, right? And he was like, you need to show your work. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, they're going to think this looks like a craft project. Like, I'm not going to. No one's going to want to see it. So I ignored him. And then a few months later, a friend of mine named Daya, she was like, hey, your stuff is really good. You should try making sure people see it. And she's like, well, if you don't want to apply for things, you should at least put it on social media. And I was like, who's going to want to pay attention? Nobody's going to want to pay attention to my social media, like whatever. And so I ignored her, but then she got me a website domain, which is my first one, which was rollumart.com. She's like, she went on Hover and bought it with me. She's like, it was in this building, because a lot of my friends were people I worked with, and now we're all just still friends, even though we're gone. I was like right around the corner sitting, because I was complaining about my job. Like, yeah, I'm good at it, but I don't really like it. And she's like, well, do something about it. And so then she went on Hover, bought my domain name. And then my other friend was like, you really need to open an Instagram. She said, just put two up. Her name's Jenny. Wonderful designer. Now she's branched into collage. And she's like, you need to show your work. We were at a cafe, and she pulled me to this shop next door called Nailu. And I was actually pitching to them for my consulting business. Because again, I had just done a really crazy thing by basically disappearing for a month. So I was like, I need to cultivate clients, because at any moment I could still get fired, because I did disappear for 5 weeks. So I was going there to pitch, doing pro bono work, so I can get, credibility to get more consulting clients. Mm-hmm. And then Junie was like, she's also a wonderful artist. You should see her work. And then she grabbed my phone and showed them my paintings. And they're like, your stuff's really good. Do you want to have a show? And I was like, a show of what? And then what happened was it was my first ever art show was at this shop 4 months later.
Wow.
So then I had it there, and then a mutual friend who knew the curator from Marcus Santos' restaurants here in New York and around the world my friends showed them my work. They're like, we want to put your painting up in our restaurant in Harlem. And it's like, it's a really famous restaurant in Harlem. And that's when it started to hit, oh, maybe I might be decent. I still wasn't calling myself an artist yet at all.
Yeah. Everyone will look at your website and know that you're more than decent. You're amazing.
I mean,
but yes,
I know, but
yes.
I didn't know it then.
You didn't know it then.
You were getting validation.
You're getting
Full
validation.
Full
Yeah.
imposter syndrome.
Yeah. No, we all have it. We all have it. Yeah.
And then I was like, one of my friends who I was at my show, she was, not she, he was like, you need to do art fairs. You need to get yourself out there. And I was like, well, I'm a self-taught artist. And I heard that you're supposed to have like some kind of Yale thing, or at least go to art school. I didn't go to art school. I went to engineering school. And he was like, just look for artist-run fairs. And he said, well, the most reputable one is called the Other Art Fair. It's sponsored by Saatchi Art. And I was like, so you actually think something that big is going to let me in? And he was like, all you can do is try. So I pondered that for a little bit. And I was like, well, let me go get some better shots of my art, because some of my pieces sold at the show, but not a lot. And I applied and I got in.
Yay.
And I was
what
like,
you wish for.
it wasn't even what I wished for, because I just didn't think I didn't think anything. And then I got it that same night that I had my show, I got a commission. And then my friend Junie was like, do you know how many artists want commissions so bad? And I was like, I actually don't know. I don't know anything about the industry. I just knew that this person asked me to create a custom work, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. Because I didn't know any. I just really didn't know anything.
Yeah,
I thought this was normal, and so I went to the other art fair, and then that's when it really hit. Ooh, I'm an artist.
Yeah,
because I was showing my work. And I had been in a few art fairs, but it was never in the context of actually being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I sold out my booth.
Wow.
All my paintings sold. And all my prints sold. And then I got like director's pick. And that Sunday, I was like, I think I'm an artist.
Yes.
Clearly.
What it hit. That's what it hit.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What year was that?
So I got accepted in 2019. We were supposed to have it in 2020, but we all know.
Yeah.
So then the fair got delayed. Do you remember that 3-6 month period where the world opened back up for a hot second, and we thought everything's fine, and it shut down again?
Yeah.
Well, in that period, that's when we had the fair.
Okay.
And that's when I sold out of everything. But also during that whole time during quarantine, I was doing my quarantine series. It was works on paper and small canvases that I had just picked up right before the city locked down. I bought like those classroom sets of canvases and I run a crawler paper. And to make sure I didn't lose my mind, I said, I'm going to make a collage every day because like I'm depressed and I'm locked in my room and my family's in Texas and I'm in New York, and all of those sold.
Wow.
So
it's amazing.
Throughout COVID, my paintings, every time I would post, they would sell. Things actually slowed down after COVID for me. And it was booming. I think because everyone was decorating their homes during COVID.
Right. Yeah.
So I was selling like crazy. But I was still doing smaller scale work. And then after we broke out of COVID, that's when my perspective changed, because I was like, no, I'm an artist and I want to do bigger things. And so then my paintings started getting bigger and bigger. I started breaking away from just doing collage. In fact, how I started getting into my typographic graffiti, the words, is due to during the COVID period, during George Floyd, I was watching Minneapolis burn, and I was so overcome. Like I was in pain because, again, I'm a very visual person. So like I just kept picturing my nephew, my brother, my father. He did like that. And I remember I had leftover printouts just sitting there in my living room, because at that time I didn't even have a studio. I was working on my dining room table, and I just started in tears watching CNN. I was grabbing pictures of my dad and my brother and my nephew. I just started tearing them up, and I grabbed a black paint and I just started painting the canvas. And again, I had never used black. Everything I did on that I had never done before.
Wow.
So I grabbed black paint, And I started painting the canvas. I hadn't even primed it, but I had to like paint it like 3 times. And then I remember because the paper was still wet, I started tearing up the paper and I grabbed the glue. The glue was in my hair. I just started slapping glue on the canvas. And I started just putting pieces together. And I kept saying, this could have been my brother. This is one like
Wow.
could have been here. Like, and I just kept building the collage until like I felt like something in me kept saying it's done. And I remember I kept looking at it, crying. And then I kept looking at it and I was saying, it's still not saying what I wanted to say. And I was like, I don't know. And then my insecurity came back again. Because I kept like, oh, I can't make the image say what I wanted to say. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to write what I'm feeling. And I remember I grabbed gold paint, a brush, and I just started writing on the canvas.
Wow.
And then as I was writing on it, then I started like adding slashes and adding radials, just whatever felt right. And then I remember I was crying so much. I was like, you know what? People need to see how much I'm crying. So I'm going to make the canvas cry. And I remember I grabbed some high flow acrylic and I just started squeezing it like a ketchup bottle on the canvas right near all the eyeballs.
Wow.
And then I got interference paint. I kept on, because I knew how to use interference paint, so I accidentally used it on my cat. And I was like, oh, before George Floyd had happened that week, I had discovered it when I was at the store that it got on my cat. And I was like, oh, you can see through it, but it's there. And so I knew that. So I was like, you know, I'm just going to write human. Because I kept saying, we're just human. Why are we being treated this way? Like, why is my brother, in my mind, I was like, why is my brother being killed? Why is my cousin and my uncle? It's like, I'm sick of this. We're just human. And I wrote human all over it in interference paint. And I remember I stood back and it was like cathartic because when I was done, it was one of my best works I had ever made.
Wow.
And
I just got chills from that.
I have yeah.
It became my new direction.
Wow.
It became my new style. But I remember all I wanted to do was get it away from me. So I remember Minneapolis was burning around 2. It was like 2 a.m. Eastern Standard. I put my painting after I made it. So I made the whole painting in like 30, 40 minutes. Like, it wasn't like I thought about it. I was pure emotion.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I posted it probably around 5 a.m. because I didn't sleep that night. And then by 6 a.m., a collector who I still speak to reached out to me on Instagram and it's like, I want this painting.
Wow.
And I told him, I was like, this is a mad emotional painting. I need to know that you're not a terrible person. I said, because if my painting gets with a terrible person after the way I'm feeling, I'm going to flip out. Because, you know, sometimes we don't know how all our collectors are.
Right.
Sometimes they buy things for opposite reasons than we would ever think.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen before. And I was like, I need to know that you want this because it resonates with you and you don't want this so that you take away my message, the people that need to hear it and feel what I feel. And so that he literally was like, can I call you? And this is a person randomly on Instagram.
Wow.
And I gave up my number and we talked on the phone. And I was like, I think you're the right person to have this painting. And then he wired me money on Zelle. I shipped it the next day.
Wow.
Wow.
And I remember I made a sister painting to that one the next day because I was still crying. And then Sandra Bland and all the others. And I remember that painting just sold like a year and a half ago after the first one. And I remember going, oh my God, this is the beginning of my new style. Because before that, I still do clean lines, but I didn't have drips. I didn't have the maximalism. I didn't have the organized chaos.
Which I love.
And now I'm like, that's me.
Because your studio in Orcoville was like I kept telling, Courtney had this teeny little, well, not teeny, but small little studio. And she's like painting like on the wall and like going crazy. And I had a much bigger studio, which she should have had actually. And I'm tidily little painting at my little table. So we should have swapped. I should have said first night, you need to be in this space.
That was my fault. So in defense of Beulah, because if she hears this, she needs to know. In defense of Beulah, when she asked me, what size studio do you need? At the time, I was only going to do these little squares. And I was like, I'm going to do maybe 10 squares. Because I was like, let me just make a few small pieces to sell like at the affordable art fair. That's what I was going to do. But then when I arrived in Orgaville and I saw that pond, everything went out the window.
Yeah.
And so then when Ziggy and their daughter and Luca came by with the canvas rolls, and I was like, So I should have been in the studio, but it was my fault. Like I told them I was only going to do 10 tiny little pieces, but I ended up making 3 60-inch by like 40-inch.
Yep.
I know better this time. I know better.
They were magnificent, and that whole experience was magnificent.
Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and Urban Stems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention Rebloom. And a huge thanks to Urban Stems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rebloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today.
I want to circle back a little bit because you shared the story of how your family would travel and how that happened and why you were brave enough to just jet off to Vietnam for 4 or 5 weeks. Because not everyone, I think, would like go there right away, but your upbringing, I think, prepared you for that too.
Yeah, I had a unique upbringing. My parents loved to travel, and my parents had a rule that unless it was like a romantic vacation, they never went anywhere without their kids anywhere in the world, unless it was a true like anniversary vacation. So because of that, we went to New Zealand a couple times. We went to Sydney. My dad loved Hawaii. We would go to Hawaii like 2 times a year. We were all over Europe. And my dad, he loved to pull out this globe and he would spin it. And he would say, okay, everybody, put your fingers. And then wherever the finger would land, if it wasn't dangerous and it wasn't war-torn, and especially the added layer for us, if they were okay with like Black people, for the most part, we would go. Yeah. But because of that, we went to some amazing places growing up. And between the way they raised us, where we didn't have any fear. I mean, we were practical. Like we knew being minorities in this world, there's certain things you got to check. But for the most part, we didn't make it something to hold us back and make us afraid to do something. We just were more cautious if we were in Germany or we were in Austria. And I think what helped is both my mom and dad, both when they were in college, had very unique travel experiences. So my dad, he grew up in Mississippi and he moved to New York just on a whim. Like, I think I get my capriciousness from him and my mom, right? Like we do sudden changes big. My mom, they both went to Dillard University in New Orleans. My mom applied for exchange programs and she got in. And so similar to me, she's like, well, I got in, I'm gonna go. And so she ended up living in Yugoslavia for quite a while. She lived in Austria. And it's so funny because I love going to Croatia now and seeing old friends. But I love Croatia because my mom loved Yugoslavia at the time. It was one country before Serbia and Croatia had the war. So like they already had that adventurous spirit. And I would say even more than my brother, I definitely got it. And then when you got it. Yeah, I love to travel. I've been all over the place. And I remember coming out of college, before up to that point, I was so used to traveling with people. But as I got older, of course, my parents they were still traveling because like our family reunions were always random locations. Like, I'll tell you about our family reunion later on. That was funny. That was really funny. But as I got older, I realized that my adventurous spirit didn't translate to all of my friends. So like they might say, oh, we want to go to Paris. Whereas I was like, let's go to Oman.
Yeah.
Like, let's go to the salt flats in like Peru. Right. And they're like, that's crazy. We're not going to go there. I was like, they're like, where do you want to go? I'm like, let's go to the station in Antarctica. Let's go on the National Geographic boat. Right. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But for me, going to Paris and London was like, okay, that's like Junior League. I'm like, I want to look it out.
You want a big old adventure.
I like
my mother was a travel agent, and having parents who instilled that in us too. I get that. I mean, I get my brother worked for the State Department, so he's been everywhere. I mean, and that's when you said, oh, Vietnam. I'm like, yeah, my brother's been there. I mean, he's been to some incredible places, but you have this wanderlust that you want to go. There's so many great stories and so many things outside of the major cities. And
absolutely.
When you said, I went to Vietnam, I'm like, not the typical place that a normal, it's like, usually it's like, oh, I'm going to go to Bali or I'm going to go to Thailand but I'm like,
that.
Yeah, well, you've done that too. But it's the priorities of seeing our great world. And I bet now, how much has all that travel inspired your art?
I was going to ask that same question.
Yeah.
So funny story with that. So my travel has informed my art, but it's art that no one's ever seen yet.
Oh.
So I'm still trying to decide if I release it because it's just very different. Like, it's very different. It's collage and it's all landscapes and it's all based on my photography, but it's replicas of my travel photographs.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
I'm intrigued.
So like it's really good. And I've been working on 2 or 3 big ones, little ones. My little ones were part of my quarantine series and they got bought up and I should have kept a few. But anyway, I know how to do it. But I remember my travels, it informed my art and my art informed my travels. And several people have asked me like, you should document your travels and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, I have. It's just similar to my other pieces. I'm not always comfortable sharing them, like even my true abstract works. But I have found that in my travel, which is I do a lot of solo travel. I prefer traveling solo. I meet people when I'm there, and sometimes I don't. Like I'm fine.
Yeah.
Like I'm an extroverted loner. Like I'm good.
Yeah.
But I look back, like I have an archive of photographs. I have about, well, you know what? Let me see. I think I have about 48,000 photos.
Wow.
Yeah. 48,591 photos in my archive.
Wow.
So I have a wealth of things to tap into. So it's a matter of, I've been trying to figure out how do I merge these landscapes I'm creating with this almost Afro-surrealism, Afro-futuristic point of view. So I have an outer space series because I'm super into astronomy, not astrology, but astronomy. I think it's my science background. So I love planets. I love atmospheres. And then that, like, what will be the landscapes on there? Can I do parallel, off-world landscapes that look like real-world landscapes? So then because one of my favorite places to travel to is Iceland. And almost every sci-fi film filmed in Iceland because it looks like you're on a different planet.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of my photography and I've been like, well, how do I merge this? And I've been playing with this now for 4 years. I've never shared any except for the few tests I did during that quarantine series. So just answer your question. Travel does inform my work.
Yeah.
Y'all just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So when are you going to share this? Because I'm so intrigued. I need to see it.
You know what it is? I think what I'm going to do is I have a residency that's going to start in a month or so.
Where are you going?
I'm going to Greece. So I'm going to Mykonos, Greece. I have a feeling, not a feeling, I know I'm going to probably start finishing them up and releasing them maybe after Greece. I do want to see if maybe the gallery wants to show them. If they want to show them, cool. If they don't, I'll just do my own thing. Like, I can always do my own thing. So we'll see.
Oh, how are you balancing having a full-time job with this emerging art career that you're nurturing?
You can't keep telling the bosses you're leaving for 5 weeks, I would imagine.
Whoa. So I have to make choices. So what I do is I am very I don't want to say the word blessed, but things are favorable for me in that my day job with Gap Inc., they are very, very happy to support my art endeavors.
That's wonderful.
Amazing. Yeah.
Like extremely happy. Enough that like there was a shirt I designed for the company for Black History Month. I would recently told my mentor, who's a high up person in Gap Inc. and Gap brand, I happened to mention to him that I might be working on a public art project in Tennessee. And he's like, let me know. We'll get everybody from Gap that's down there to come support. Like,
wow.
Like super supportive. So there's that piece. The second piece is my day job. Like some people worry about corporate jobs and you taking like a director and above position, because I'm a senior director VP. And they're worried, oh, they'll take away a lot of time. But at a certain level in corporate, you usually get unlimited vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have unlimited vacation.
Oh.
So I don't overuse it. But if I happen to need to take off 3 weeks, not a big deal. I could just do it.
Right.
Wow.
Now, more than 3 weeks, usually we have to have, I was like, hey, like, how are we going to do this? So what I've learned now is choose residencies that are 2 or 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so that it's not something out of the ordinary. Because a lot of people in my job take 2 week, 3 week, 1 week vacations multiple times in the year. No big deal.
Right.
So now I just make sure I choose, if I get a residency, that's my vacation. But that also means that I choose residencies where I really want to just go.
Yeah.
Like, I was
yeah.
like, okay, I
Yeah.
really want to go to France. I really like Greece. I'm not going to just pick one necessarily in New York. I'm going to pick one away because I do love to be everywhere.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
actually opened me up to residencies where people are like, oh, well, there's one that's in Jordan. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll go to
Wow.
Jordan 2.5,
Yeah.
3 weeks.
But I would
That's-
imagine too, it also allows you to explore really freely your creativity, because you've
Yes.
got this day job, which thank you is paying the bills. And now it's like you can create, just as you said, like you can do travel, you can do collage, you can do anything that you want. I mean, yes, you want to create things that people want and you can sell, but that also takes a little bit of the pressure off of that too. So you can really let your heart sing.
It takes a lot of the pressure off because
Yeah.
even with the new body of work that I worked on, like I have my main one, which is called The Others. It is about people that feel othered in society, and that's tied to my travel. So each country that I have gone to, I'm now trying to return to and document and do photography of people that feel like they're others, whether it's people who are minorities, identify with different gender identities, identify just being different. So like I interviewed a colleague of mine who is a female identifying. She grew up in a strict Irish Catholic background. She said, I always felt different because I wasn't like what my culture told me I was. She's part of the Other series. Another
Yeah.
friend of mine, drag queen, they're part of the Other series. Then when I went to Mexico for my residency, I discovered that there's a whole population of Afro-Mexicanos. I was like, oh, that's perfect. So I documented them. Try and do this. So now I've been doing a lot of research, and my mom has a history teaching background. So I've been asking her, hey, when we were in Australia, aside from Aboriginal people, what were some other people that were other? And she would tell me, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, okay, well, I think I need to go to Sydney again, but this time I'm going to go into the Outback and see if I can find these people and photograph them. So that's led to like one series. But then my other series focuses in on all types of things. Like I have multiple bodies of work, but I've only released probably one of them.
That's amazing.
I just love you so much, and you
Yeah.
inspire me, and I love that. Like you're just going to be creating the work that you were put on this earth to make.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the themes that you're going after in your work, and the fact that you want to travel, and you always felt like you were other in different situations, and
Absolutely.
now you're celebrating those people and traveling, and it's just a whole melting pot of Courtney all coming out in your work. I just love that so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
you're so inspiring. And I was thinking of, when we talked on it, we touched on it, the imposter syndrome, but you need to lead with the word artist. I hope you lead everywhere you go with, I
Yeah.
am an artist, hear me roar, because just everything that you see and you incorporate into your work I'm speechless at what you've shared with us today. It's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Thank
Aw.
you. Thank you. You're an inspiration. You're going to be a huge inspiration to our listeners, because I think so many of the friends, and this is the main reason that we wanted to start this, is that we hear people who are doing their day job, they're unhappy, or they're wanting to pivot, or maybe they are in a career and they want to pivot within that career, but they've got fear to do it. And sometimes it's just doing it. It's just
Just
putting yourself out there and maybe you're not doing it as a career right off the bat, but it's really expressing yourself in the most pure way that you know how, and bringing the world that you see and sharing that. Your story is incredible.
And I
Incredible.
love how you had friends, because I think when you start doing that, putting yourself out there in an authentic way, sharing things you love, people show up in your life that are going to support
Yeah,
and cheerlead that along.
yeah.
And the fact that your friend said you need to show this, and now it's in this store, and you need to apply for this show, and having those people to nudge you along into places where you might not have gone yourself. I think the universe gives us those gifts when you're
they
starting
do.
to do things that you love.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so funny. In my corporate job, oftentimes I have a lot of people who I'm the mentor for them. And I'm pretty bold. Like, I'm pretty bold. So I'm always like, well, who says you can't do that? Well, why not? Like, that's just my vibe. And even with my art, talking to other folks who I know for a fact, like I'm thinking of a good friend of mine, he at the time was like, I'm so scared to go and do what I'm passionate about. I remember he visited me in Houston when I was having a particular low point in my life. And we were chatting about his life. And I was like, look, I'm depressed right now. Let's talk about you. And I said, well, what are you dreaming about? And he was like, I want to create films and I want to do this, but I don't know if I'm good enough. And I was like, dude, who cares? Just make what you want to make.
Yeah.
Like, I'll say, pretend the only two people in the world are me and you. Like, make something that's going to make both of us laugh, right? And fast forward to now, he's opened a film studio.
Wow.
He's making a short film. He's doing all these things. And we were literally, we hung out this past Friday and we were looking at how far we came. And we both were in the states where I didn't think I was an artist. Like, I knew I was making stuff, but I didn't think I would be successful. I didn't think I would be in museums. I was worried, like, am I going to be taken seriously? He was like, I'm just a guy from like middle America. I identify as gay. I do production. Like, no one's going to take me seriously. And neither one of us thought we were what we were dreaming about being.
Wow.
Then that was because he came to visit me during COVID when I was at my low. And it's 2024. And like now my paintings are in 4 museums. He has his production company. He's flying overseas to go check on script and animation. And I'm like,
Wow.
You know what? The only difference between me and him and a few other people is that even though we were doubting ourselves, we still tried.
Yeah.
You still tried, and you also had people that believed in you. And
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing too, when you've got those friends that say, I'm working on a couple of projects now, and I've got friends who say, I believe in this. And that's, and you believed in him and he believed in you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just that voice of belief in your head, because your own voices sometimes tamp it down, and sometimes you need to hear that from other people. I'll tell you what, Courtney, I believe in you. We believe in you. Your work is phenomenal. We want to see that travel series. I want to. Okay, we're traveling with her. Lori and I are doing a Rebloom travel series. That's going to be our next one because we want to go. We must connect with you. But
I'm actually going to be in New York, and Jamie has a daughter in New York. I'm
I
going to be
do.
there.
I'm going to be in. I'm going to be in. Oh, we're getting together. We're
Yeah,
getting together for sure.
I'm doing a one-day workshop September 14th at the Gudrun Shedden store in Soho.
Oh, I will come by. You should come to my studio. It's in Jersey City. It's not far. It's at Monica Jeffrey.
We're coming. We're coming.
Yay.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for being our guest today. I think you have inspired our listeners to not only, I think you've inspired them to follow their dreams and to rebloom, and certainly travel to cool places and and look for the things that maybe people don't always see, and express your emotion. And you are a delight, and you are a delight. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Lori, I'm speechless from our interview today. How about you?
I was so excited to introduce you to Courtney because yeah, she's a special human being. And there were so many things she said that really struck a chord. One of them, and I think this is something that people can really take to heart, is when her friend was saying, I want to make films, but who's going to take me seriously? And her advice was, just make it, make what you want. And imagine you're just doing it for me and for you. I think if people can maybe take that whole perfect, grandiose vision of what it might be and just take those steps, just take a step and just start making what you want to make or create what you want to make, and put it out there and see how people respond. And maybe if you don't even care how people respond, it doesn't matter. You can just make it for yourself. Like the night that Courtney was painting in her studio, reacting to George Floyd. And like, I just like that canvas is just so full of, like, it makes me cry thinking about that night and her, like all the emotion that went into that piece and the release that had. Yeah, like so many things she says are so powerful.
So powerful. And I think it's also it's not also limiting yourself to one medium. I love that it's just also try something, explore, keep exploring, and let your emotion just happen, and don't pigeonhole yourself into one particular space or genre or anything. And she's bringing in collage and photography and paint and all of those to let her true emotions, to express her true emotions and authentically. And she was incredible. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed this as much as
One
we
other
have.
thing that that I really love, and I think this is true, when she went to the other artist show, not knowing the whole world of fine art and going in with a little bit of, naivete. I actually think there's a blessing to that sometimes. And I think that's another thing that stops people. I think they think often that you have to figure it all out, or you have to know all the ins and outs of something to go down that path. But there's also a real beauty to not knowing the rules, because when you don't know the rules, you tend to do something that's maybe different or new or unexpected.
100%. And people tend to notice you and who sold out of her show, but she did. And, that is because maybe she wasn't playing by the quote unquote standard rules. She played outside of the box. And I love that. And so be courageous, everyone. And we thank you again for joining us, and peace, love, and rebloom until our next episode.
Life is too short not to follow your passions, so go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of Rebloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and rebloom, dear friends.